Shalom, Israel. It's Kazawan. And the name of this video is, Should we use the name Jesus? I'm doing this video because a lot of people ask me this question. Now, some people teach that Jesus is the only name that we should use. And then you have people who teach that we shouldn't use the name Jesus at all. If you watch my videos, you know that I use the name Yahweh, which is his name in ancient Hebrew. But what I want to do in this video is give a broader understanding of why we should not use the name Jesus, but also how to deal with the situation wisely. So let's go to the time of the crucifixion. This is John chapter 19 and verse 19. It says, "And Pilate wrote a title and put it on the cross, and the writing was, Yahweh of Nazareth, the King of the Jews." Verse 20. This title then read many of the Jews, for the place where Yahweh was crucified was nigh to the city. Watch this. And it was written in Hebrew and Greek and Latin. So this title, Yahweh of Nazareth, the King of the Jews, was written in 3 different languages. Now, before we deal with this, we have to clear something up. Many people make the mistake of claiming that names don't change across languages. But that's not completely true. Names don't change across languages when the person is able to pronounce the name in the original language. However, when they can't, a transliteration or even sometimes a substitution is put in place. Even in the Bible, we see this process taking place. This is Revelation 9 and 11. It says, "And they had a king over them, which is the angel of the bottomless pit." Here it is. "Whose name in the Hebrew tongue is Abaddon." Watch this. "But in the Greek tongue have his name Apollyon." So we see that the Hebrew name is different from the Greek name. Here's another example. In English, we say John. In ancient Hebrew, we say Yachanan. In Greek, we say Ioannes. Clearly, this name is changing across languages. Different dialects exist among different nations, and therefore, name alterations happen all the time. So we have to be right and exact about what we say so that we can properly explain why we should not use the name Jesus. It's not because names don't change across languages. It's a deeper and more important reason. Let's go back to John chapter 19 and verse 19. It says, "And Pilate wrote a title and put it on the cross, and the writing was, Yahweh of Nazareth, the King of the Jews." Verse 20. This title then read many of the Jews, for the place where Yahweh was crucified was nigh to the city. Here it is. And it was written in Hebrew and Greek and Latin. So Yahweh's name was written in 3 different languages: Hebrew, Yahweh, Greek, Iesus, and Latin, Iesu. Now, why did Pilate write the title with his name in 3 different languages? Because there were Israelites who spoke those languages. Some of them didn't read or speak Hebrew at all during this time. This is Acts 6 and 1. It says, "And in those days, when the number of the disciples was multiplied, there arose a murmuring of the Grecians against the Hebrews, because their widows were neglected in the daily ministration." Now, when we look at this verse, we see interaction between the Grecians and the Hebrews. And at first glance, it appears that the Grecians and the Hebrews are 2 different people. However, they're actually both Israelites. The only difference is the language that they spoke. Let's look up the word Grecian in this verse. Here it is. It's G1675, and it's the Greek word Hellenistes. And when you go down to the outline of biblical usage, it says a Hellenist, one who imitates the manners and customs of the worship of the Greeks. and used the Greek tongue. Watch this. It says, used in the New Testament of Jews born in foreign lands and speaking Greek. See that? And when you look here at the definition, it says a Hellenist or Greek-speaking Jew, Grecian. So now we understand that the Grecians in the Bible are actually Jews who spoke the Greek language. Let's go back to Acts chapter 6 and pick it up at verse 5. It says, and the saying pleased the whole multitude, watch this, and they chose Stephen, a man full of faith and of the Holy Ghost, and Philip. Stop. So they chose Stephen and Philip. Now, who is this man Stephen? This is the same Stephen who gets stoned to death in the next chapter. So now we know that Stephen was a Grecian, and so was Philip. They were Greek-speaking Jews. Now we're going to see Philip later, but for now, let's focus on Stephen. He was a Greek-speaking Jew. This is Acts chapter 7 and verse 59. It says, and they stoned Stephen, calling upon the Most High and saying, watch this, Lord Yahushua, receive my spirit. Now, we know that Stephen was a Greek-speaking Jew. So let's look at this verse in the Greek to see what Stephen actually said. Here it is. In the English, it says, Lord Jesus, receive my spirit. But in the Greek, which is the highlighted section, it says, Kyrie Iesus dexai ta pneuma mu. You see? Kyrie Iesu is Lord Jesus. So Stephen used the name Iesu. Now, somebody might see this and say, well, if Stephen used the name Iesu, why can't I use the name Jesus? Now, that's a logical question, but let's think about why it's not the same thing. What we have to consider is that we live in a different time period. Now, why is that significant? Let's go to 2 Corinthians 11 and 4. It says, for if he that cometh preacheth another Yahushua, whom we have not preached, or if ye receive another spirit, which ye have not received, or another gospel, which ye have not accepted, ye might well bear with him. See, this is what the real issue is. Like Paul said, if someone comes preaching another version of Yahushua, different from the one in the Bible, people will believe it. And that's exactly what happened. When the Greek-speaking Israelites said the name Iesus, they was actually talking about the biblical Son of the Most High, not modern-day Jesus, because modern-day Jesus is nothing like the person who the Bible describes. But modern-day Jesus is the person who people believe in today, and that's the problem. The Greek-speaking Jews in biblical times knew who Yahushua was. They knew he was a Hebrew from the tribe of Judah. They knew how he looked. They didn't have a false image in their mind and a false doctrine connected to that image. So when they said Iesus, they was actually talking about Yahushua. But when people say Jesus today, it's a whole different person. That's the problem. Those of us who have the truth, we know that modern day Jesus is not the same person as Yahushua from the Bible. So therefore, we have to disconnect our people's minds from Jesus, because many of them don't know that there's a difference. They have this false image of Cesare Borgia burned into their mind, and they don't know that this is a trick to make them believe in a false Messiah. This is 1 Maccabees 3 and 48 in the Apocrypha. It says, and laid open the book of the law. The nations opened up our book. It says, wherein the heathen had sought to paint the likeness of their images. You see? So the modern day Jesus image is a trick to deceive our people into believing in a false Messiah. When you see this picture, the name that comes into your mind is Jesus. But this is not how the Messiah or the Mashiach looked. So this picture is a form of psychological warfare. It's mind manipulation. It's a deceitful trick of Satan to mislead you into idolatry and false doctrine. This is 2 Corinthians chapter 2 and verse 11. It says, lest Satan should get an advantage of us, watch this, for we are not ignorant of his devices. Some of us are not deceived. We know that the Jesus image is false and that there is a certain thought process that goes along with that image and that name. That's why we have to reestablish the true name of Yahawashi, because the name Yahawashi has a whole different vibration connected to it. When we say Yahawashi, we think of an Israelite. We don't think of a Greek. When we say Yahawashi, we think of a man who promoted the laws, statutes, and commandments of the Most High. Not a man who taught that the law was over. Jesus and Yahawashi are two different people. So that's why using the name Jesus in these times is not the same thing as using the name Jesus during Stephen's time. The image of Yahawashi was not corrupt back then, so it was clear who Stephen was talking about. However, that is not the case today. The Jesus that the world knows today is not the same as the man in the Bible. Now, let's go to Acts chapter 11 and verse 19. This verse picks up after Stephen was stoned. It says, now they which were scattered abroad upon the persecution that arose about Stephen traveled as far as Phoenice and Cyprus and Antioch, preaching the word to none but unto the Jews only. So when the disciples went through these places, they initially only preached to the Jews who spoke Hebrew. But watch this, verse 20. And some of them were men of Cyprus and Cyrene, which when they were come to Antioch, here it is, spake unto the Grecians, preaching the Lord Yahawashi. So when the disciples came to Antioch, they began to teach the Grecians, which we know are Greek-speaking Jews. These Jews didn't know the Hebrew language. They only spoke Greek. So if something had to be broken down to them, you had to show it to them in Greek. Now the disciples were able to speak Greek, which allowed them to bring the Hellenized Jews into the truth. Now, just because the apostles used the Greek language to explain things to the Greek-speaking Jews, that doesn't mean that they never used Yahawashi's Hebrew name. Let's go to Acts 21 and 40. This is Paul speaking in front of an Israelite council. It says, and when he had given him license, Paul stood on the stairs and beckoned with his hand unto the people. And when there was made a great silence, watch this, he spake unto them in the Hebrew tongue, saying, so when Paul got in front of the council, he didn't speak Greek or Latin. He spoke Hebrew. So everything that we're about to read was spoken in Hebrew by Paul. Let's see what he said. This is Acts 22 and verse 1. It says, men, brethren, and fathers, hear ye my defense, which I make now unto you. Verse 2. And when they heard that he spake in the Hebrew tongue to them, they kept the more silence. And he saith, again, everything we're about to read was said in Hebrew. Let's jump down to verse 6. This is still Paul talking. It says, and it came to pass that as I made my journey and was come nigh unto Damascus about noon, suddenly there shone from heaven a great light round about me. Verse 7. And I fell unto the ground and heard a voice saying unto me, Saul, Saul, why persecutest thou me? Verse 8. And I answered, who art thou, Lord? And he said unto me, watch this, I am Yahawashi of Nazareth, whom thou persecutest. Now, in the English it says, I am Jesus. Luke wrote this in Greek, which says, Ego eimi Iesus. But we know that Paul is telling this story in Hebrew. So he actually said, Anakya Yahawashi. I am Yahawashi. So this shows that Paul was using Yahawashi's real name around people who understood Hebrew. It's no different than what a lot of us do today. When we run into other Israelites who know the language, we say, Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahweh Shai Barakatah, which means Yahweh in the name of Yahweh Shai bless you. Now we do that because we understand each other. Now, it's true that if you go up to the average person and say the name Yahweh Shai, they won't have a clue what you're talking about because they don't speak the language. However, that's not an excuse in these times not to use or teach Yahweh Shai's real name. Why? Because we all speak English. So there's no language barrier preventing us from explaining what his true name is. When you meet someone new, all you gotta say is, listen, I'm saying the name Jesus to you because that's the name that you know, but his actual name in Hebrew is Yahweh Shai. It's that simple. So there's no excuse for us not to use his true Hebrew name when it literally takes less than 30 seconds to explain. Now, I know how people are, so let me clarify what I'm saying. I am not saying that you have to know the name Yahweh Shai in order to make it into the kingdom. But what I am saying is, why not teach his real name if you know it? Especially when you consider all the man-made false doctrines attached to the name Jesus. Why teach the name Jesus when you know that there's a certain vibration that comes with that name? Why not take people away from that confusion completely by giving them his true name and the correct doctrine to follow? That's what I'm saying. Now, I'm not talking to newer people who may not have the ability to explain things clearly. But if you're a teacher in Israel, there's no reason why you shouldn't be teaching his true Hebrew name if you know it. No reason at all. This is Luke chapter 21 and verse 8. This is Yahweh Shai talking. It says, and he said, take heed that ye be not deceived. Don't allow yourself to be fooled. It says, for many shall come in my name, saying, here it is, I am the Messiah. So there are many false versions of Yahweh Shai. It says, and the time draweth near. Watch this. Go ye not therefore after them. So Yahweh Shai told us not to follow after people pretending to be him. Modern day Jesus is a false version of the true son Yahweh Shai. It's not the same person, so we should not promote modern day Jesus. Now, I want to address a common question in regards to this topic. Somebody might ask, if Yahweh Shai's Hebrew name is so important, why didn't the New Testament authors just write Yahweh Shai's Hebrew name in their letters to the Greek-speaking Israelites? In other words, why not just put the Hebrew name in there so that when they came across it, they would see it? Well, let me show you why that wouldn't make sense. Look at this. This is a standard English sentence with a Hebrew name at the end. Now, if you don't know the Hebrew, this is what would happen when you try to read it. You would say, he had great favor with the Most High, and his name was... See the problem? You're stuck. You can read the English part, but when you get to the Hebrew name, you have no idea what it says or how to pronounce it. So it wouldn't make sense for me to write you a letter in English and put a Hebrew name in the letter. You won't know what it says. However, watch this. Let's read it now. It says, he had great favor with the Most High, and his name was Samuel. See that? Anybody who understands English can read this because it's completely written in English. So as you can see, even if the apostles would have put Yahweh Shai's Hebrew name in their letters, the Greek-speaking Israelites would not have known what it said or how to even pronounce it. They didn't read Hebrew. So the apostles wrote the name Jesus because that's the language the Greek-speaking Jews understood. And by the way, this Hebrew name is pronounced Shamwa'allah, which is the ancient Hebrew form of Samuel. Now notice that the pronunciation is not the same as Samuel, but it's still the same person. Again, when the Greek-speaking Israelites said Jesus, they were still talking about Yahweh Shai. They wasn't talking about an entirely different man with a whole different doctrine. That's the problem with using the name Jesus today. Modern day Jesus is a whole different person than the man in the Bible. I have to keep saying that because that is the issue. So we have to teach people about the real Son of the Most High. And we can't do that using the name Jesus because that name already has a particular history attached to it that will not allow people to receive the true teachings of the Son of the Most High. When you try to tell people some of the things that Yahweh Shai actually taught, they say, not my Jesus don't teach that. And that is the problem. The Jesus that the world knows has a different doctrine from Yahweh Shai in the Bible. Every time people hear the name Jesus, they think of this guy, Cesare Borgia. They think about Sunday church and everything that comes along with that whole system. So that's why we have to erase that name and that image out of their minds and replace it with the true name Yahweh Shai, the Son of the Most High. This is Romans chapter 10 and verse 14. It says, "How then shall they call on him in whom they have not believed?" Our people that's outside the truth, they don't believe in Yahweh Shai. Why? It says, "And how shall they believe in him of whom they have not heard?" You see, they never heard of Yahweh Shai. All they know about is Jesus. Their grandmother and their mother taught them about Jesus, and that's all they know. It says, "And how shall they hear without a preacher?" You see, how will our people know about Yahweh Shai if we don't teach them? They won't. That's why we have to move away from that name Jesus, because that name is attached to a false representation of who the true Messiah really is. Again, even though the apostles used the name Jesus to connect with the Greek-speaking Jews, they still taught Yahweh Shai's real Hebrew name. So we might use the name Jesus to initially connect to people who speak English, but we should still be teaching his true Hebrew name out in the open also. Now, earlier, we read when Paul was telling the Israelite council about his encounter with Yahweh Shai. But let's go to Acts chapter 26 when Paul is telling the story to King Agrippa. This is Acts 26 and 14. It says, "And when we were all fallen to the earth, I heard a voice speaking unto me," watch this, "and saying in the Hebrew tongue, Saul, Saul, why persecutest thou me? It is hard for thee to kick against the pricks." Verse 15, "And I said, Who art thou, Lord?" Remember, this conversation is taking place in Hebrew. Paul said, "Who art thou, Lord?" It says, "And he said, I am Yahweh Shai, whom thou persecutest." So we see that Yahweh Shai spoke to Paul in Hebrew. Now this is important because Paul spoke Hebrew, Latin, and Greek. So Yahweh Shai had the option to give his name to Paul in any of those languages. But notice, he didn't tell Paul that his name was Jesus, which is Greek. And he didn't tell Paul that his name was Iesu, which is Latin. And he definitely didn't tell Paul that his name was Jesus, which is English. He told Paul his name was Yahweh Shai. He gave Paul his name in Hebrew. Again, most of us speak English, yes. So you may have to use the name Jesus when you first meet somebody. That makes sense. But as I showed earlier, once you get into the conversation, it takes less than 30 seconds to explain that his real name is Yahweh Shai. See, here's the thing. You don't want anybody calling you something that's not your name. Well, how much more respect should we have for the Son of the Most High? We should call him by his actual name. Now, I want to address another point about the Greek name Jesus. because a lot of people want to know where that name came from. Jesus is a transliteration of the Hebrew name Yahawashi. So let me explain how the Hebrew name Yahawashi became the Greek name Jesus. The ancient Hebrew had no vowels, but as time went on, Israel was influenced by other languages and adopted a vowel system that changed some of the original sounds. During the Babylonian captivity, the name Yahawashi became pronounced as Yehoshua. Later, Yehoshua took on a shortened form, which is where you get the name Yeshua. We can see this name alteration in Nehemiah chapter 8 and verse 17. Let's read it. It says, "And all the congregation of them that were come again out of the captivity made booths, and sat under the booths." Watch this. "For since the days of Jeshua, the son of Nun, unto that day had not the children of Israel done so, and there was very great gladness." Now, who is Jeshua, the son of Nun? It's talking about Joshua, whose Hebrew name is Yahawashi. So the pronunciation of Yahawashi was changed to Yeshua during the Babylonian captivity. Look at this. This is the Gesenius Hebrew Chaldee Lexicon. It says, Jeshua, a contracted form, meaning a shortened form, it says, of the pr.n, meaning proper name, look at this, Yahawashi. See that? Jeshua or Yeshua is a shortened form of the original proper name Yahawashi. It says, used in the later Hebrew, again, Yeshua is a later pronunciation. Look at this. It says, Jesus. Now that's Greek. So we see that Jesus is the Greek form of Yahawashi, or the Greek form of the shortened Yeshua. It says, number 1, of Joshua, the leader of the Israelites. You see? And then it gives you the verse we just read, Nehemiah chapter 8 and verse 17. So that shows you that in Nehemiah 8 and 17, Jeshua, the son of Nun, is actually talking about Joshua. But it also shows you that Joshua and Yahawashi had the same Hebrew name, Yahawashi. Now remember, Yahawashi is the original Hebrew name. Yeshua is the modern shortened version of the name. The Greek name Jesus is a transliteration of Yeshua. It's not a translation, it's a transliteration. Let me show you the procedure. So here we see the name Yeshua. If we break this name down into sections, you get Ye-Shu-A. Now, let's transliterate the Hebrew name Yeshua into Greek. The process of transliteration requires you to take the sound from one language and then reproduce the same sound in another language. So starting with the first sound in the name Yeshua, we have Ye. So how do we reproduce the sound Ye using Greek letters? We can't, because there are no Greek letters that can reproduce the modern Hebrew sound Ye. So what do? We go with the closest sound that we have available. The closest we can get to the Hebrew Ye sound using Greek letters is Ie. We take the Greek letter iota and the Greek letter eta, and when you put them together, you get Ie. Again, Ie. So it kind of sounds like a Y sound. So if we look at the name, instead of Ye, now we have Ie. The next sound in the name Yeshua is sh, the SH sound. So how do we reproduce the sh sound using Greek letters? We can't. There are no Greek letters that can make the sh sound. The closest we can get to the sh sound in Greek is s, the plain S sound. So we take the Greek letter sigma and it gives us the s sound. So let's go back to building the name. Instead of yesh, we have ies. Now the next sound in the name Yeshua is the U sound. How do we reproduce the U sound using Greek letters? We take the Greek letters omicron and upsilon, and when you put them together, you get the U sound. So instead of Yeshu, now you have Yesu. Now, this last letter in modern Hebrew, based on the vowel points, gives you the ah sound. However, because of the rules of Greek grammar in regards to male names, this last letter is dropped, and a sigma or S sound is placed at the end to make the name masculine. So instead of Yeshua, you get Jesus. Jesus. That is the process of how you get the Greek name Jesus. It's not a trick. It's not a scheme. It's just a process of transliteration. Now, I want to address one last thing because I hear a lot of people saying that the Greek name Jesus means Hail Zeus. And that's just not true at all. The reason I'm addressing this is because people try to use that lie as an attack against Yahweh Shai being the true Messiah. Sometimes we hear things or we see something on a random website and we just run with the information without doing the proper research. You have to be careful because if you run into somebody who actually knows languages, you're going to end up looking foolish and unlearned if you bring that argument. There is no connection between the name Jesus and the name Zeus. As we read earlier in the Jacinius Hebrew Chaldee Lexicon, Jesus is just a Greek form of Yeshua. Not to mention, I showed you the transliteration process of how you get the name Jesus. So the whole Zeus argument has no weight to it. But just to go one step further, let's look up the word Zeus in the concordance. Here it is. So we see that it's G2203, and it's the Greek word Zeus. When you go down to the outline of biblical usage, it says Jupiter or Zeus. It says a father of helps, the national god of the Greeks and corresponds to the Roman Jupiter. The definition under it says Zeus, of uncertain affinity. In the oblique cases, there is used instead of it a probably cognate name Dis, which is otherwise obsolete. Zeus or Dis, among the Latins, Jupiter or Jove, the supreme deity of the Greeks, Jupiter. So, as you can see, Zeus and Jesus is not the same person. The name Zeus is spelled Zeta, Epsilon, Upsilon, Sigma. But Jesus is spelled Iota, Eta, Sigma, Omicron, Upsilon, Sigma. These are two different names with no connection to each other. Now, other people try to say that Jesus is Zeus, and therefore Yahweh Shai is Zeus. Again, this is just ridiculous. Look at the last part of the definition of Zeus. It says, the supreme deity of the Greeks, Jupiter. In other words, Zeus and Jupiter is the same person. So watch this. This is Acts 14:11. It says, and when the people saw what Paul had done, they lifted up their voices, saying in the speech of Lycaonia, the gods are come down to us in the likeness of men. Watch this. Verse 12. And they called Barnabas Jupiter and Paul Mercurius because he was the chief speaker. So when these people saw the miracles that Paul and Barnabas did, they called Barnabas Jupiter. Who is Jupiter? It's Zeus. When you look the word Jupiter up in the concordance, it's the Greek word Zeus. They thought Barnabas was Zeus. So how can Yahweh and Zeus be the same person when the Greek text makes a clear distinction between Yahweh and the false Greek deity Zeus? Nobody thought Barnabas was Yahweh. They thought he was Zeus, which proves that they are not the same person. So when we deal with the name Jesus, we have to deal with the facts, not conjecture. Now, what about the name Jesus? Does Jesus mean Hail Zeus? No. And believe me, I'm not defending the name Jesus. This whole video is about not using that name. But I'm also not going to make up stuff that's not true to support my case. Jesus does not mean Hail Zeus, and it doesn't mean pig in Latin or any of the other things that people say. Just because a word sounds like another word, that doesn't mean that it has the same meaning. Again, if you study languages, you know that Jesus is just the English spelling of the Latin name Iesu. Now, Iesus is the Greek form of the name. As time passed, Iesus was brought over into the Latin as Iesus, spelled I-E-S-U-S. You can see this in the King James 1611 edition. This is a screenshot of Matthew 4:12 from the King James 1611 edition Bible. It says, "Now when Iesus had heard that Ian was cast into prison, he departed into Galilee." See that? It says Iesus and Ian, which later became Jesus and John. When the English letter I became the letter J, the name went from the Latin Iesus, I-E-S-U-S, to Jesus, J-E-S-U-S in English. That's where the name Jesus comes from. It has nothing to do with Zeus or a pig. What I'm showing you now is historically documented information based on language. Once again, I'm not defending the use of the name Jesus. I'm against the use of the name Jesus when you know his real name. But that doesn't mean that we can just make stuff up, because then we become intellectually dishonest. And that is not the proper methodology to use when you're trying to prove a point. We have to provide the correct information and still show why we shouldn't use the name Jesus, as I have already done in this video. Again, I'm only going over this information because people use these kind of attacks to try to discredit Yahweh. However, none of these name variations have anything to do with him existing or not existing. He existed, and his name was and is Yahweh. So we see how we got the Greek name Jesus and how we got the English name Jesus. Now, in the New Testament times, not one disciple ever used the name Jesus. But they did use the name Jesus to connect with the Greek-speaking Israelites because that was the language they understood. However, that's not an excuse for us today not to use his real name, because we all speak English and we are more than capable of understanding that his real Hebrew name is Yahweh. And if we know that his birth-given name was Yahweh, why would we not use it? We can all say it. Why would we not use it? There's no excuse unless you don't know. So, should we use the name Jesus? No. We should not use the name Jesus once we know better. Once we know what his name is, we should call him by his name. Now, before I end this video, please be advised, all general comments are accepted. If you disagree with something that I say, you have that right. However, If you attack me on a personal level outside of the scriptures and resort to name calling and childish, unspiritual behavior, your comment will be erased and you will be blocked. Also, if you disagree with something that I teach, that's fine. You have the right to comment about it. But if you make a comment in disagreement and you don't use scriptures to support what you're saying, I won't block you, but your comment will be erased because I deal with scriptures, not opinions. Now, to the sincere Israelites who watch my videos, I'm not talking to y'all. I appreciate you guys for taking the time out to watch and listen. But I'm talking to these immature, non-spiritual trolls who always have something to say. But when you go to their page, 9 times out of 10, they don't have one single video teaching anything. But yet, they want to come on my page and teach in the comment section. I'm not allowing that anymore. So, with that being said, as always, I hope that somebody got some understanding from this video. And with that, I say, Shalom.